You know, it's interesting. Noah was a catalyst, and that's all he really was. He's what kind of propelled them to Virginia, which ultimately got them to Alexandria. And then even in his death, he's a catalyst. You know, he was one of the few who were a part of the group outside of Carl who was still a kid. So his death will impact them in, you know, everyone in a very unique way. But also, his death represents that this new, like,
is there, I mean, do the producers, do they notice a decrease in viewership? Does that happen?
Not necessarily. The one thing that's really great about this show is that with other shows that have this dynamic, they will kill people off for a lot of different reasons. Every death in this show means something to the story. They're not just getting rid of anybody, it's propelling other storylines. So I think that's why, like I know with Beth's death, people were pissed. Oh God, they were so angry. But then seeing later that her death was necessary to propel the group to leave that area of this is why we have to go. And the, you know, same thing with, you know, Tyrese's death, where, you know, it set up things for Sasha. So yeah, I think everybody initially is really upset, and then they see that next episode and see, oh, it's setting up something for something else. And that's what helps it out. You know, it's not like, you know, some of these shows where, you know, you get those rumors of, and they just didn't work well with people, so they killed them. That's not the way this works. Yeah.
I'm sorry, the friend of bit bad news. Due to some scheduling conflicts, this is probably the end of your session in The Walking Dead now.
Oh, wow.
Now that your part as Noah in the series is over, can we expect to see you in anything else?
Yeah, you know, we have the Criminal Minds spinoff that starts in the top of the year, top of next year that we're shooting now. That I can't say anything about yet, but yeah, no, I'll be around. Yeah.
So quite a technical question. There's a lot of close combat in the show, obviously, and sometimes you'll see a machete, but that's very rarely. And obviously there's the sword, but usually people go for this tiny knife. See, why is no one using pitchforks or spears?
When you break down the logic of it, which we have to do all the time, it's when you get into the hand-to-hand situations, it's incredibly difficult. It's, you know, even because everything we do, we kind of play high. That's good.
Yeah.
Hold on one second. Yeah, and one is just the logistics of moving around with it is difficult, and then also with our kills, what we have to play is going through a human skull is not easy going in and coming out. So it's easier to have something that you're closer to for the pull-out to use it again, rather than pulling from a farther place. That's the big thing of why everybody kind of stays kind of close hand to hand, because it gets stuck. I mean, naturally that's what would happen, especially with a decomposing brain. There's a lot of thought that goes into it, man. I'm telling you. What do you think? Yeah.
Are there any characters, past or present, you would like to have interacted with?
Oh yeah, Bernthal, Shane. We'd love to
that would have been cool.
work with him. Ended up like spending some time with him outside of, you know, as we did other conventions and stuff like that. And it would have been great. It would have been fantastic. You know, he just brings such an intensity to the work. It would have been fantastic. Yeah, I think really that's really it for me. Like, he just would have been awesome. Yeah.
Behind the scenes, were there any funny moments?
I mean, there always are. You know, one of the big things is that everyone always gets hurt. Like, someone's getting hurt every episode. Most of the time, it's Norman. Honestly, it's usually him. In my second episode, I think it was 506. Right when Melissa gets hit by the car. We have that scene where it was scripted in there that Noah stops Daryl. Like, he pulls him and he stops him. And that was a big issue for me because Norman's a bulldog. Like, he's huge. I'm like, how does he stop him? Like, this is a man who loves this woman and is going to naturally go after her. How does this kid that you barely know stop him? So we were kind of talking about that for a while until Norman just looked at me and he walks up to me, he's like really intense. He goes, "Just fucking stop me." I went, "Okay." So as he charges for the door, I threw my arms around him and I pulled back as hard as I could. And we both took a fall. And he ends up like falling on his tailbone and whipping his neck. Whiplash, just completely whiplash. And I thought like, oh yeah, I'm done. I killed the guy. Guy from the show. That's it. I'm never working again. So as he's like icing his neck and all that, I'm walking by, getting ready to go home, and he looks at me. He goes, "That's what I'm talking about." It just sets the tone for how the rest of the show is. Like that's what's happening each episode. It's like someone's getting hurt, and we're laughing about it. Yeah.
Just one thing I've noticed is, I mean, it's obviously in the States it's on the cable network and you can get away with a lot of swearing. I've noticed in The Walking Dead compared to other cable shows in the States, they draw back a lot on that.
Mm-hmm.
Given the violence and the horror and everything, is there a reason? Because to me sometimes when I'm watching a scene, I'll be thinking, this character will be like, "Fuck shit!" They don't do it. Is there a reason?
I think a lot of shows use that for shock value, and I think we have such a shock value in what we do. There's not as much of it. Also, considering where the show is now, it's not really much that's rattling these people anymore. I get that feeling at the top of it. But at this point, it's just, one of the things I know we definitely played with in that 5th season was, each herd or zombie encounter is more annoying than anything at this point. It's not even necessarily scary. Everybody, Rick finally has that moment from the comic where he talks about being the Walking Dead. And like, that's what it is at this point. Everyone's ready to die. Everyone's good to go. This world is messed up, and if, you go, it's actually a blessing. So at that point, everything's just annoying. Like Carol has that moment, I think, at some point where she's in the car crying and they're beating on the window and she's just yelling, "Shut up." Like that's it. That's what it's become at this point. So I think that's why you don't see nearly as much of it, because the frustration level has gone down. It's just not even frustrating anymore. It's just annoying. Like no one's fearing for their life. I haven't come over here much. Yeah.
Just wondering on like character lineage, and how much of the character is built by you and how much by the script? Like, do you work quite closely with that?
It's interesting, it really is, because we don't get that much ahead of time. So it's a mixture of us building our own stuff, and then as we get little aspects of it, kind of building onto that. So it's this weird pull, and push type of thing. Like for my audition piece, it read as if Noah was a bad guy. And that's kind of how I went into it. It was like, all right, I'm ready for this. And then you end up getting a strip that's completely different. And that's not the tone. So yeah, it's one of the more interesting shows in that way. We build our own ticks and all of that as well. But as far as story goes and things that kind of affect the character in those ways, it's a little bit, it's a dance. It really is. Yeah.
I'm just wondering how much of an influence does the comic book have on the actual TV series as well?
It's getting a lot closer now. It wasn't as much before, but Scott Gimple has definitely said he's going to stick a lot closer to it now. Now that we're in this kind of Alexandria safe zone. I think the only thing that you won't see is sticking to characters living or not. That's just they're not going to stay with that. Like Noah was a hybrid of several people who just ultimately were not there or are in the comics that you won't see. That kind of thing. You'll just see those things kind of bleeding over back and forth. So I think the main story will stay, kind of on track. However, what happens with those characters in the main story won't be the same.
The Walking Dead is known for killing off major characters, but are there any characters like Rick or Daryl that said that they just won't kill off?
No. No one is safe. Like, that's what's really weird, is that every season it's like I know that's something with when I first got there I'd spoken about with Norman of like every season he knows that he would be a big death and it could just happen at any point. There's nobody that they're sticking with that won't eventually go. I mean, Kirkman has said it, eventually everyone will die. Like, that's how, come the end of it, there will be no one left. So no one's actually saved. No.
Do you ever see it ending? The whole like Walking
It
Dead?
has to, you know, like any show. You don't want to jump the shark, you know, you don't want to just keep going and going and going. We all have our theories as to what the ending is. No one actually knows. But yeah, at some point it's got to stop. This just has to die.
No time soon.
I don't know. You know, it depends. You know what AMC wants to do. I think that's an AMC question more.
Fair enough.
Like, it just depends on what's going on with them.
The last time we saw Noah, he was talking to the architect guy. Do you think Noah could have made it as an architect?
No. No. I think there was Noah seeing a need and trying to fill it and trying to protect his people. But I've always imagined, or you know, as we continue to build, Noah was always going to be the one to fall on the grenade. That was always going to be what he wanted to do. I think he was trying to make himself useful within the group, because as right upon his introduction to these people, 2 main group members died. So I think that was his way of trying to do that. However, he knew that he owed them a death. So eventually, even if he was an architect, he was going to sacrifice himself in some way. Yeah.
How hard or easy was it for you as an actor to kind of get into being in that big hysteria of being in The Walking Dead? Like, for 3 seasons, all these guys have pretty much been together, and you lose 1 or 2 people, but you had to rush yourself upon, you know, all of those guys. So how hard or easy did they make it?
It was difficult at first, mainly because I was thrown in to a place with the first episode that did not have that dynamic at all. You know, the hospital was pretty well kept. So it was this weird thing of playing that kind of being out on the road for a little bit, but still being somewhere, you know, kind of safe. By the time I got out of that first 3-episode arc, though, you know, this is one of the best casts ever, and Andy Lincoln is one of the best leaders of a cast I've ever seen. So he makes that very easy. The tone is set. No other show shoots like this. You know, if you're seeing blood, sweat, and tears on the screen, it happened while we shot it. So yeah, I think everybody just goes into this place of being uncomfortable. And that's kind of what helps it the most. You know, we're not somewhere pretty. We're not, you know, on some beautiful sound stage with great craft service. No, we're in the middle of the woods, running. That's it every day. That's literally it. So it just ends up translating, you know, and everybody has their aspect that they bring to the table. But you know, it's one of these kind of places of like, you either come hard or you go home, and that's just the way it is. Yeah.
With so many, with there being less issues of the comic being put out each year compared to the series, is there any worry of the series catching up too close to the comics and not having anywhere to go with it?
Oh, no. Kirkman and Gimple work well together, very closely. They have a game plan. They definitely do, and you're not gonna find us kind of like sputtering their wheels or whatever, trying to figure out what's next. I guess I can say that. You're not seeing less and less of them by accident. It's all on purpose. Who have I not gotten to?
You said that you all of your own theories of how the show will end. What is that?
Oh, what's mine? I think your last shot is Rick dying. Carl picking up his gun and him and Judith walking down the road. That's how it ends. That's how I think it is. It's just the 2 of them. That's what I think. But you know, you never know. This is no telling. That's mine, at least.
2 questions. Okay, which from the characters that were in from the beginning, which character for you do you think has come furthest in their personal journey? So I've got a few on my...
Yeah. I mean, the easiest one to say is Rick, because he's a completely different person now. You know, he went from this guy who's kind of trying to maintain order and civilization to now in this like last few episodes going, how many of you am I gonna have to kill to keep you all safe? Like that's it, he's an animal at this point. So naturally I would say him. But you have those like Carol who were like, you know, complete victims.